नमस्कार विद्यार्थी मित्रांनो, सर्वज्ञ कोचिंग क्लासेसमध्ये तुम्हा सर्वांचे स्वागत आहे. आज आपण इयत्ता 10वीच्या इतिहासाचे पहिले प्रकरण म्हणजेच इतिहास लेखन पाश्चात्य परंपरा याचा अभ्यास करणार आहोत. स्टुडंट्स, प्लीज रिमेंबर, फ्रॉम युअर बोर्ड एक्झाम पॉइंट ऑफ व्ह्यू, दिस चॅप्टर हिस्टोरियोग्राफी डेव्हलपमेंट इन द वेस्ट इज व्हेरी व्हेरी इम्पॉर्टंट. या धड्यामधून बरेच प्रश्न परीक्षेमध्ये विचारले जातात. In today's lecture, we will understand what historiography means, what are its characteristics, and we will also learn about some of the most important thinkers and their ideas. तर चला, व्यवस्थित लक्ष द्या आणि आपण सुरुवात करूया.
So before we start with the first paragraph of our textbook, let's think about a very interesting question. As you can see on the screen, is writing history an art or is it a science? थोडा विचार करा, तुम्हाला काय वाटतं? See, some people might say it's an art, because it involves writing, creating a story of the past, a narrative. It requires some imagination. काही लोकांना वाटेल की इतिहास लिहिणे ही एक कला आहे, कारण त्यात लेखन आणि कथाकथन येते. But on the other hand, others might say, no, it's a science, because it is based on facts, on evidence, on proof. You cannot just imagine things in history, right? तर काही म्हणतील की नाही, हे एक विज्ञान आहे, कारण ते पुराव्यांवर आणि तथ्यांवर आधारित आहे. So, which one is it? Well, this entire chapter will help us find the correct answer to this question. As we study the chapter step by step, you will automatically understand whether history is an art, a science, or maybe a little bit of both.
Okay, students, so this is our agenda for today's lecture. This is the path we are going to follow to understand the entire chapter. First, we will understand the meaning of historiography. इतिहास लेखन म्हणजे नक्की काय ते आपण आधी समजून घेऊ. Then, we'll see the characteristics of modern historiography. मग आपण आधुनिक इतिहास लेखनाची वैशिष्ट्ये पाहू. After that, we will learn about the development of a scientific perspective in Europe and, very importantly, some of the notable scholars or thinkers who gave important ideas. युरोपमधील वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोन आणि महत्त्वाच्या विचारवंतांविषयी आपण शिकणार आहोत. And finally, we will look at some of the new approaches to history writing. This step-by-step structure will help you understand all the concepts clearly, and it will also help you remember the points for your exams. त्यामुळे या मुद्द्यांनुसार आपण धडा शिकणार आहोत, ज्यामुळे तुम्हाला प्रत्येक गोष्ट व्यवस्थित समजेल.
So, let's start with our first topic from the agenda. What is historiography? This is the most basic and fundamental question of this chapter. If you understand this definition properly, I promise you, the rest of the chapter will become very easy.
चला, तर आपल्या पहिल्या आणि सर्वात महत्त्वाच्या मुद्द्यापासून सुरुवात करूया. इतिहास लेखन म्हणजे काय? याची व्याख्या आपण नीट समजून घेऊया.
So, the textbook defines historiography as the writing of a critical historical narrative. Let's break this down. A narrative means a story or an account of events. A historical narrative means an account of past events. But students, the most important word here is critical. The word critical here means to check, to verify, to analyze. It means you don't just accept any information you get, you have to question it, you must examine it.
तर पाठ्यपुस्तकानुसार इतिहास लेखन म्हणजे चिकित्सक ऐतिहासिक कथनाचे लेखन. इथे चिकित्सक हा शब्द खूप महत्त्वाचा आहे. याचा अर्थ फक्त भूतकाळातल्या घटना लिहून काढणे नाही, तर त्या घटनांची खोलवर तपासणी करणे, मिळालेल्या पुराव्यांची पारख करणे आणि मगच इतिहास लिहिणे.
The scholar who does this work, who critically examines sources and then writes the narrative, is called a historian.
आणि जो विद्वान हे काम करतो, त्याला आपण इतिहासकार म्हणतो.
For example, if I ask you to write about the history of your school, just writing down the foundation year that you heard from some senior student is not historiography. But if you go to the principal's office, check the old documents, talk to teachers who've been working for a long time, check old records critically, and then you write about your school's journey, that is historiography. This definition can be asked for 1 mark in your exam. What is historiography?
Now, it is very important to understand that this modern, critical way of writing history is a recent development. But the tradition of recording historical events is very, very ancient. People have always wanted to remember the past. Look at this image on your screen. This is a fragment of the earliest known inscription. It is from the Sumer civilization in Mesopotamia, which is now the country of Iraq. And it is almost 4,500 years old. It shows soldiers marching, and it records a battle fought between 2 kingdoms.
आता हे जे चिकित्सक इतिहास लेखन आहे, ते एक आधुनिक पद्धत आहे. पण घटना लिहून ठेवण्याची परंपरा खूप जुनी आहे. हे चित्र बघा. हे मेसोपोटेमियामधील सुमेर संस्कृतीचे सर्वात जुने शिलालेख आहे. या 2 राज्यांमधील लढाईचे वर्णन आहे.
This tells us that even in ancient times, people felt the need to record important events, like the stories of the brave deeds of their kings and the battles they won. This was not exactly historiography, but it was the beginning of history writing.
To write a critical historical narrative, a historian cannot just write whatever they feel. No, They must follow a specific scientific method. This is called the historical research method. Students, please pay very close attention. This is a very, very important question for your exam. It can be asked for 4 marks. Explain the steps of the historical research method. Let's look at the steps. Step 1. Formulating relevant questions. For our school history example, the question could be, how has our school developed in the last 50 years?
पहिली पायरी समर्पक प्रश्न तयार करणे.
Step 2. Collecting historical information and examining references. This means finding old documents, photographs, and records related to your school.
दुसरी ऐतिहासिक माहिती गोळा करणे.
Step 3. Formulating hypotheses. Now, a hypothesis is like an educated guess. For example, based on some early information, you might guess our school probably started with only 5 classrooms.
हा एक तात्पुरता अंदाज असतो ज्याला आपण गृहीतक म्हणतो.
Step 4. Critically examining various sources of history. This is the critical part. This means checking if the documents are real or fake and comparing information from different sources to find the actual truth.
चौथी मिळालेल्या सर्व साधनांची चिकित्सकपणे तपासणी करणे.
And the final, step 5, writing the historical narrative. Based on all your verified information, you now write the final history.
आणि शेवटची पायरी म्हणजे या सर्वांच्या आधारावर ऐतिहासिक कथन लिहिणे.
Please learn these 5 steps in the correct order for the exam.
Okay, so we have now understood what historiography is and what method historians use. Now let's move to our next section. In this section, we will learn about modern historiography. What are the characteristics that make modern history writing different and scientific? This is one of the most important topics of this chapter, so please pay full attention. चला, आता पुढच्या भागाकडे वळूया. आता आपण शिकणार आहोत आधुनिक इतिहास लेखनाची वैशिष्ट्ये.
So there are 4 main characteristics of modern historiography. Students, this question is almost always asked in the board exam for 2 or 4 marks, so please learn it by heart. Let's look at them one by one. First, its method is based on scientific principles. It starts with formulating questions and is based on evidence, just like the research method we just saw. पहिला, याची पद्धत वैज्ञानिक तत्वांवर आधारित आहे. Second, the questions are anthropocentric. Now this is a new word. Anthro means human. Centric means centered. So, anthropocentric means human-centered. Modern history is about the deeds of human beings in the past. It does not explain events as acts of God. For example, it will study why a king won a battle based on his strategy and army, not because some god helped him. दुसरा, प्रश्न हे मानव-केंद्रित आहेत. म्हणजे हे प्रश्न भूतकाळातील माणसांच्या कृतींबद्दल आहेत. देवांबद्दल किंवा दैवी गोष्टींबद्दल नाहीत. Third, the answers to these questions must be supported by reliable evidence. A historian cannot just make things up. You need proof, like a document or an artifact. तिसरा, या प्रश्नांची उत्तरे विश्वासार्ह पुराव्यांवर आधारित असतात. पुरावा लागतो. And fourth, history presents a graph of mankind's journey. It shows how humanity has progressed over time, from using stone tools to traveling in space. चौथा, इतिहास मानवाच्या प्रवासाचा आलेख मांडतो. So please remember these 4 points very well.
Now, it is said that the roots of this modern historiography, with all its scientific characteristics, can be found in the writings of ancient Greek historians. In the 5th century BCE, there was a Greek historian named Herodotus. He is called the father of history. And why is that? Because he was one of the first to travel to different places, gather information, and write about the past in a systematic way. Even the word history itself is originally a Greek word. Herodotus used this word for his book, which was called the Histories. For your exam, you might be asked a 1-mark question. Who is known as the father of history? The answer is Herodotus. आता असं मानलं जातं की या आधुनिक इतिहास लेखनाची मुळं प्राचीन ग्रीक लेखनात सापडतात. ग्रीक इतिहासकार हेरोडोटस, जो इसवी सन पूर्व 5व्या शतकात होता, त्याला इतिहासाचा जनक म्हटले जाते. हिस्ट्री हा शब्द मूळचा ग्रीक आहे आणि त्याने तो पहिल्यांदा वापरला.
Let's move to our next topic now. How did this scientific perspective in historiography actually develop in Europe? You see, until the 18th century in Europe, discussion about history was often mixed with philosophy and religion. The church was very powerful, and many events were explained through a divine lens, as God's will. But then, the 18th century came, and it was a time of great progress in science and philosophy. This period is also called the Age of Enlightenment. Thinkers started believing that we can understand and study social and historical truths by using objective, scientific methods, just like we study nature.
आता पुढचा मुद्दा पाहूया. युरोपमध्ये हा वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोन कसा विकसित झाला? 18व्या शतकापर्यंत युरोपमध्ये इतिहास हा तत्त्वज्ञान आणि धर्मात मिसळलेला होता. पण त्यानंतर विज्ञान आणि तत्त्वज्ञानात खूप प्रगती झाली. विद्वानांना वाटू लागले की आपण वैज्ञानिक पद्धती वापरून सामाजिक आणि ऐतिहासिक सत्य शोधू शकतो.
But this is a very important point to understand. Even if we use a scientific method, historical research is not the same as natural sciences like physics or chemistry. Why? Let's look at this table to understand the difference. In natural sciences, you can do experiments in a laboratory and you can repeat them. For example, in a chemistry lab, you can mix two chemicals and see the reaction again and again, and the result will always be the same. But in history, you cannot recreate past events. We cannot recreate the Battle of Panipat in a lab to see who would win. We were not there to observe it. विज्ञानात तुम्ही प्रयोगशाळेत प्रयोग करू शकता. इतिहासात तुम्ही भूतकाळातील घटना पुन्हा घडवू शकत नाही. In science, you can formulate universal laws, like the law of gravity, which is true everywhere on Earth, right? But in history, you cannot make such laws. The outcome of one battle does not mean the next battle will have the same outcome, because every event is unique, with different people and different circumstances. इतिहासात वैश्विक नियम बनवणे शक्य नाही, कारण प्रत्येक घटना वेगळी असते. This is a very important conceptual difference to remember.
A very important turning point in the study of history came in the year 1737. The Göttingen University was founded in Germany. Now, what was so special about this university? It was the first university in the world to have an independent, separate department of history. Before this, history was usually taught as a part of literature or philosophy. But this event established history as its own independent academic discipline. It got its own identity. इतिहासाच्या अभ्यासात एक महत्त्वाचा टप्पा आला 1737 साली. जर्मनीतील गॉटिंगेन विद्यापीठात जगातला पहिला इतिहासाचा स्वतंत्र विभाग सुरू करण्यात आला. This can come as a fill in the blank for 1 mark in your exam. The Dash University in Germany was the first to have an independent department of history. The answer is Göttingen University.
Now we come to a very interesting and important part of the chapter. We will study some of the notable scholars whose ideas and philosophies shaped modern historiography. The way we study history today is because of the work done by these great thinkers. So first, in this section, we will look at 3 scholars, René Descartes, Voltaire, and George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel.
आता आपण काही महत्त्वाच्या विचारवंतांचा अभ्यास करू. आधी आपण देकार्त, व्होल्टियर आणि हेगेल या विचारवंतांबद्दल शिकू.
The first scholar we will study is René Descartes. He was a French philosopher. His most important contribution to historiography was his insistence on verifying the reliability of historical documents. He was among the first to say that we must critically examine every single source. His famous rules on the screen, let's read it slowly. Never to accept anything for true till all grounds of doubt are excluded. What does this mean? It simply means you should not believe anything unless you are 100% sure and have checked all the facts. जोपर्यंत सर्व शंका दूर होत नाहीत, तोपर्यंत कोणतीही गोष्ट सत्य मानू नका. For a simple daily life example, if your friend comes and tells you that tomorrow is a holiday, a follower of Descartes would not believe it just like that. They would first check the school's official notice board, then ask a teacher or check the school app. Only when all doubts are gone and all sources confirm the news, only then would they accept it as truth. This is the essence of the critical method in history.
Next, we have Voltaire. His original name was François-Marie Arouet. Please remember this name because Voltaire is considered the founder of modern historiography. Why? Because before Voltaire, history writing was mainly focused on the chronological order of events, kings, their dynasties, and the wars they fought. That's it. But Voltaire said that this is not enough. He argued that to understand history truly, we must also consider all aspects of human life, like the social traditions of that time, the trade, the economy, and agriculture. In simple words, he made the scope of history much bigger. He said we should study the history of common people, not just kings.
पुढचे विचारवंत आहेत व्होल्टेअर. त्यांना आधुनिक इतिहास लेखनाचे जनक मानले जाते, कारण त्यांनी सांगितले की इतिहास म्हणजे फक्त राजे, तारखा आणि लढाया नव्हे, तर आपल्याला मानवी जीवनाचे सर्व पैलू अभ्यासले पाहिजेत.
For your exam, a 1-mark question can be, who is known as the founder of modern historiography? The answer is Voltaire.
Now let's talk about George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. He was a German philosopher. Hegel insisted that the presentation of history should be logical. He believed that the timeline of historical events is not random or chaotic. Instead, it shows progress. According to him, history is constantly moving forward in a logical way, towards a better state, towards more freedom and reason. आता आपण जॉर्ज विल्हेल्म फ्रीडरिक हेगल यांच्याबद्दल बोलूया. हेगेल यांनी भर दिला की ऐतिहासिक वास्तव तर्कशुद्ध पद्धतीने मांडले पाहिजे. त्यांच्या मते ऐतिहासिक घटनांचा क्रम हा प्रगती दर्शवतो. Think of it like a plant. It starts as a seed, then it becomes a sprout, then a small plant, and finally a big tree. It is a logical progression, right? Hegel believed human history is also like that. It progresses logically over time. And he gave a method to understand this logical process.
So, Hegel gave a very famous method of analysis which is called dialectics. Students, this is an important concept for your 2-mark questions. Let's understand it slowly and step by step. According to this method, any idea or theory is understood in a process of 3 stages. The first stage is called thesis. A thesis is an initial idea or a theory. In Marathi, it is called siddhant. The second stage is antithesis. An antithesis is a contrary or opposite theory to the thesis. In Marathi, it is pratisiddhant. And the third stage is synthesis. After a logical discussion of both the thesis and the antithesis, a new, better theory is formed that includes the good points of both. This is called synthesis. In Marathi, it is samanvay. Let's take a simple example from your life. Thesis. A student says, to get good marks, we should only study all day and not play at all. Ha zhala siddhant. Antithesis. Another student says, no, that's wrong. To be healthy and fit, we should only play sports all day and not study. Ha zhala pratisiddhant. Now we have a logical discussion. Both of these ideas are extreme and not good for a student, right? So we arrive at a synthesis. For overall development, a student needs a balanced routine with dedicated time for both studying to get good marks and for playing sports to stay healthy. Ha zhala samanvay, a new and better idea that combines the truth of both. This process of thesis, antithesis, synthesis is called dialectics. Please remember this for your exam.
Let's continue our discussion on notable scholars. Now we will look at 2 very influential thinkers from the 19th century who completely changed the way history was researched and written. They are Leopold von Ranke and Karl Marx.
चला, आता आपण 19व्या शतकातील 2 महत्त्वाचे विचारवंत, लिओपोल्ड वॉन रांके आणि कार्ल मार्क्स यांच्याबद्दल जाणून घेऊया.
Leopold von Ranke was a German historian at Berlin University, and he had a huge influence on 19th century historiography. He spoke about the critical method of historical research, but he put the greatest emphasis on one thing: using original documents. We also call these primary sources. He said a historian must examine all documents related to an event with the greatest care. And he strongly criticized the imaginative narration of history. He believed a historian's job is not to be a storyteller, but to show what exactly happened, based only on original documents. लिओपोल्ड व्हॉन रोंके हे एक जर्मन इतिहासकार होते. त्यांनी चिकित्सक संशोधन पद्धतीवर आणि मूळ कागदपत्रांच्या वापराला सर्वाधिक महत्त्व दिले. For example, if we go back to our school's history example, Ranke would say you must rely only on the original admissions registers, old mark sheets, and official government papers. You should not just listen to someone's stories or memories, as they can be inaccurate. This focus on primary sources is Ranke's biggest contribution.
And now we come to a thinker whose ideas literally shook the world. Karl Marx. In the second half of the 19th century, Karl Marx presented a completely new way of looking at history. While other historians were focusing on kings or ideas like Hegel or documents like Ranke, Marx said that history is not about abstract ideas. He said that history is about living people and their fundamental needs for food, clothing, and shelter. His ideas were radical and very influential.
आत्ता आपण कार्ल मार्क्स यांच्याबद्दल शिकूया. कार्ल मार्क्स यांनी इतिहासाकडे पाहण्याचा एक नवीन दृष्टिकोन मांडला. त्यांच्या मते इतिहास हा अमूर्त कल्पनांचा नसून तो जिवंत माणसांचा आणि त्यांच्या मूलभूत गरजांचा आहे.
According to Karl Marx, human history is the history of class struggle. This is a very famous line. But what does it mean? Marx said that society is fundamentally divided into 2 classes. The first class is the one that owns the means of production. Now, what are means of production? They are things like factories, land, and machinery that are used to produce goods. This is the owner class. The second class is the one that does not own anything and has to work for the owner class to earn a living. This is the working class. मार्क्सच्या मते मानवी इतिहास हा वर्गसंघर्षाचा इतिहास आहे. समाजात 2 वर्ग असतात. एक मालक वर्ग ज्याच्याकडे उत्पादनाची साधने असतात आणि दुसरा कामगार वर्ग. Marx argued that the owning class always exploits the working class to make more and more profit. This creates a constant conflict or a struggle between these 2 classes. And Marx believed that this class struggle is the main engine that drives all historical change. His famous book on this topic is Das Kapital. For your exam, this is a very important 2-mark question. Explain Karl Marx's theory of class struggle.
So far, we have seen how historiography developed with the ideas of thinkers until the 19th century. But the story doesn't end there. In the 20th century, the scope of history expanded even more. New approaches and new schools of thought emerged which started looking at history from completely new angles. Let's look at some of them. आतापर्यंत आपण 19व्या शतकापर्यंतचा इतिहास लेखनाचा विकास पाहिला. 20व्या शतकात काही नवीन दृष्टिकोनांमुळे इतिहासाची व्याप्ती आणखी वाढली.
In the early 20th century, a new school of historiography was started in France. It was called the Annales School. These historians said that history is not just about political events, great leaders, and wars. They believed it's also about things that affect common people, like climate, local geography, agriculture, trade, and technology. For example, to study a famine, they wouldn't just look at the king's policies. They would study the rainfall patterns from that time, the price of grain in the market, and the daily life of the farmers.
फ्रान्समध्ये ॲनल्स प्रणाली नावाची एक नवीन विचारप्रणाली उदयास आली, ज्यांनी सामान्य लोकांच्या इतिहासावर भर दिला. Another very important development was feminist historiography. This means restructuring history from a woman's perspective. Thinkers like Simone de Beauvoir argued that for centuries history was written by men and was focused only on the achievements of men. Feminist historians started researching the roles and contributions of women, which were often ignored. Their role in the family, in the economy, and in social movements. For example, a regular history book might only list male freedom fighters. A feminist historian would specifically research and write a book about the forgotten contributions of female freedom fighters.
यालाच स्त्रीवादी इतिहास लेखन म्हणतात, ज्यात स्त्रियांच्या दृष्टिकोनातून इतिहासाची पुनर्रचना केली जाते.
And finally, let's look at the 20th century French historian Michel Foucault. He brought a very new concept to history writing. He called his method the archaeology of knowledge. Now, what does this mean? Foucault argued that simply arranging historical events in a chronological order is not the real task of a historian. He said it is more important to explain the transitions in history. For example, instead of just noting the dates, he was interested in understanding why people's thinking about psychological disorders changed from one period to another. He wanted to dig up the history of knowledge itself, just like an archaeologist digs up artifacts. He studied areas that earlier historians had completely ignored, like the history of medicine, the history of prisons, and the history of mental asylums. आणि शेवटी मिशेल फुको यांनी ज्ञानाचे पुरातत्व नावाची एक नवीन पद्धत मांडली. त्यांनी फक्त घटनाक्रमाने लावण्याऐवजी इतिहासातील बदल किंवा स्थित्यंतरे स्पष्ट करणे अधिक महत्त्वाचे मानले.
Alright students, so with Michel Foucault, we have covered all the main topics and thinkers mentioned in this chapter. Now let's move to the most important part from your exam perspective. We will quickly revise the most important points that you absolutely must prepare for your board exam. चला, आता आपण पूर्ण धडा संपवला आहे. आता आपण परीक्षेच्या दृष्टीने सर्वात महत्त्वाच्या मुद्द्यांची उजळणी करूया. Please pay full attention now.
Please pay full attention. These are the top 5 topics from this chapter that you must master. Number 1, the 4 characteristics of modern historiography. Number 2, Hegel's concept of dialectics, with the example. Number 3, Karl Marx's theory of class struggle. Number 4, a short note on the Annals School. And number 5, the individual contributions of scholars like René Descartes and Voltaire. Students, ya 5 muddevar exam yeto. I can assure you that most of the questions from this chapter in your board paper will be based on these 5 points. So you must prepare these topics very, very well. आता नीट लक्ष द्या. हे 5 मुद्दे सर्वात महत्त्वाचे आहेत. आधुनिक इतिहास लेखनाची 4 वैशिष्ट्ये, हेगलची द्वंद्व पद्धत, कार्ल मार्क्सचा वर्गसंघर्षाचा सिद्धांत, ॲनल्स प्रणालीचे योगदान आणि देकार्त व व्होल्टेअर सारख्या विचारवंतांचे कार्य. So there is no need to be scared of this chapter at all. If you prepare these points, you will definitely score good marks. आजसाठी तुमचे गृहपाठ म्हणजे हा धडा एकदा शांतपणे पुन्हा वाचा आणि मी सांगितलेले 2 महत्त्वाचे प्रश्न, आधुनिक इतिहास लेखनाची वैशिष्ट्य आणि कार्ल मार्क्सचा सिद्धांत, हे दोन्ही प्रश्न तुमच्या वहीत उत्तर लिहून काढा. पुढच्या लेक्चरमध्ये आपण दुसरे प्रकरण, इतिहास लेखन, भारतीय परंपरा सुरू करणार आहोत. तोपर्यंत काळजी घ्या आणि अभ्यास करत रहा. धन्यवाद.